at home for joining us. And thank you everyone who's here. We're socially distanced and masked, so I'm going to try to speak loudly and clearly so you can hear me. My name is Dr. Sarah Manastra. If you have any questions throughout this series, you're welcome to email me. I'm the one that kept messing up Outlook repeatedly and sending wrong information. But who I'm so excited to introduce is Dr. Jennifer Fraley. Dr. Fraley is lecturer of clarinet at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. So our sister school, basically, where she teaches the clarinet studio, woodwind techniques, and music appreciation. She performs frequently with percussionist Benjamin Fraley as Sources Duo, an ensemble that focuses on new or rarely heard works for clarinet and percussion. In addition to performing, Dr. Fraley is the creator of the E-Flat Clarinet Project, a repertoire and pedagogical resource website that promotes practice techniques and solo repertoire featuring the E-Flat Clarinet. Jennifer Fraley is a Yamaha performing artist and performs on Yamaha clarinets exclusively. So, welcome. Let's give Dr. Fraley a round of
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so excited. I know I've said that word so many times, but it is not hyperbolic. So we're going to break this up into 3 little sections. We have 2 students that are going to be performing, and then Dr. Fraley is going to be talking about percussion and clarinet music and her work with this medium in chamber music, and have a small demonstration. So we're going to start with Lexi Tharp. So Lexi is one of our students who is virtual. I'm going to remove the pin here, so if you two are going back and forth, it will switch between you. Lexi, due to connection issues that might arise, recorded her piece, about the 4 minutes of it, and then we'll be at the ready to try anything that you would like. Lexi is a sophomore from Peshtigo, which is a small town north of Green Bay. She's currently majoring in instrumental music ed, clarinet performance, and minoring in Spanish. She's also a current member of Delta Omicron. So Lexi, do you want to say hi so we can see you?
Hi.
Hi, Lexi.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will work. I'm going to test it real quick. Turn this off. And if this doesn't work, I'll let you play it. Dr. Fraley, is that okay? Oh, you're muted.
That should be okay. Yeah.
Great, all right. And then when it's 5 minutes, I will stand up and give you the 5-minute fingers. So here we go.
Great job, Lexi.
Thank you.
It's very nice to hear you. What do you most enjoy about playing this piece?
I like because we usually just play classical music and it's just nice to try a different type of style and
Yeah.
play around with something.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room to play around with stuff in here, right? So I think what we'll probably do is we'll explore some of those possibilities, which I'm sure you've already done. But I know there's some things that it's so helpful because even if, woo, sorry, I'm getting myself back at me a few times here. It's just always nice, especially with like extended technique stuff, to have so many different ways to describe it. Because something that totally makes sense to me doesn't always make sense to one of my students. So having multiple ways of approaching it is just so important. Let's start with the opening, just because you seem like you know that part really well.
Okay.
So when you're playing the grace notes, how are you thinking about those? Like, have you decided like they're going to be the same every time, or have you thought about that much?
I know I haven't really thought about that.
Okay. For those of you that haven't seen some of the music clips for this, a lot of the ornamentation is supposed to mimic, right, the sounds and the ornamentation that would be done. It's kind of like improvisatory from a klezmer style, right? So have you listened to some performances of this then?
Yeah, a couple different ones.
Okay. Have you actually listened to Five's performance?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you actually listened to the like for the performance that it was written for?
Oh, by Kovacs?
For
Like,
by Feidman?
oh no.
That I think it's available. It might be on YouTube. It's kind of wild. So it's probably a lot further than you'd want to go, but you should have a listen to it just for fun. But a lot of times when I'm looking at grace notes and I'm trying to play klezmer, because I'm not a klezmer clarinetist, most of us aren't, right? The grace notes are a little bit faster than I normally want to play. So like if you go to the end of this, right, you have a lot of grace notes in between some eighth notes there. Can you play that line? And I just want you to think this time about like how long are those grace notes? And then we'll decide if we want to try something a little bit different with them. So can you play just like that last phrase, the piano?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think about your grace notes there?
I think I'm playing them fast, I guess.
Okay. Are you totally comfortable with them? You don't sound uncomfortable. Yeah, you don't sound uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it almost sounds like they're squeaking sometimes. If you're listening to like a klezmer style. So can you try, like, especially when you have these bigger ones, we want it to be like really fast.
Okay.
Yeah, can you try that with those faster?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And now the hard part is not to emphasize it, because of course we're thinking about it. So then it comes off a little bit stronger. So can it be kind of in the background now? So it's almost like when you forget you have one of those moments where you like don't put your fingers down on the right note and you go, oh no, quick, I have to go to the right note. You catch yourself. It almost has to sound like that, except you're doing it on purpose.
Okay.
like with that last one. Let's see. That's really small. Here. So can you bring out the eighth notes even a little bit more?
On the F sharp.
Yeah. So like the last two-ish beats of.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's something that I think that you could just kind of have fun messing around with a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, when we have the trills and the grace notes in here, what's the purpose of them?
Like the trills and the grace notes, I think, I don't know, just add that klezmer character to it.
Yeah. And I think they also give a sense of inflection, right? So they kind of can inform your phrasing because it's not exactly what we're used to playing, like something that's a little bit more standard. Like we're not thinking about it like we would Mozart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could play this stuff a lot better than I can because you've practiced it. But you have all these like trills and grace notes and stuff like early on, like the first few lines.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite spot up there that you can pick that you can try thinking about those as like emphasis points, like points of inflection?
Sure. Let me look. Okay.
Great. Now can you really like overemphasize those, like almost like over accent them? So throw away a little bit of your like good clarinet tone and control for a minute and
Okay.
just go for it. Like have it be messy.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know about the listeners, but I kind of like when you go for it a little bit more.
Okay.
So I think you can take some more risks, even if you decide, that you're going to bring it back eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Like find out how much can you push it. Have you experimented? No, because your glitz was really good. Have you experimented with adding a little bit of bends or even some growls in there?
I've tried growling. Still something I have to practice. It's kind of hard for me to do that.
If any of you have clarinets at home, and I used to try to growl by like kind of singing at the same time. Is that what you're doing?
Like humming, kind of? Yeah.
Okay, this is what helped me the most, is I had a friend that was just like, why are you trying to sing? Just go,
Okay.
So like you're really irritated with someone, and you just play, and then you just kind of make that kind of sound at the bottom of your throat. It's probably exactly what you're not supposed to do if you're a vocalist, but I don't know. Do you want to try it?
Sure, I can try it.
Yeah, give it a try. There's a little bit. The way I practice some of that stuff I kind of like what I do for flutter tonguing. It's so weird to like sing and like vocalize while you have a clarinet and you're playing. And sometimes it's helpful to just practice making those sound like while you have a mouthpiece in your mouth, but you're not trying to actually produce sound. So that's something you can kind of just play around with. But I think you have opportunities to like play into some of these like decorative things more. So can you try that same line again and maybe even do a little bit more with the bends? And if you're off on some rhythms or something right now, then like don't sweat it. You're just trying some inflection things.
Okay.
Yeah, can you be even like I'm playing all the wrong notes, but you know, can you like overdo it?
Okay.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing we'll do, because I think we're probably out of time. But like right at the end of that, can you? Yeah. Okay. So I think for me, it's just one of those pieces where you have so much opportunity to explore with sounds that, you know, sometimes we're trying not to make.
Yeah.
And I think you could do more. You have such a good control over so many of those grace notes and trills that I think you could just push into them a little bit more and like show that, yes, I am doing these and they're fun, and you know, make it part of the phrasing and show that it is just a totally different style and that you have that versatility to play that. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really fun. Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me pin you back to the top. So our next performer, do you want to just try to play a few notes so we can test the mic, make sure it's not too loud? So our next performer for you is Dylan Bond, who is a first-year performance major here at Point, and he is originally from Kenosha, correct? Kenosha, Wisconsin. So why don't you just play a scale? We'll make sure it's not too hot. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that's good here.
All right. It's gonna be great.
should we stop here? Maybe just so we have some time to work through it, since some of it's really repetitive. Great job, Dylan. Sorry, I didn't know if I was supposed to stop you, but I figured just want to make sure we have some time to work through some stuff. But yeah, this is such a beautiful piece. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of expressive things that's coming across even on Zoom. So great job with that. You could hear some good dynamic shaping. And I know for those of us that have been on Zoom for all sorts of lessons and stuff, that could be challenging to do sometimes. And I like that you're really keeping it steady at tempo for right now. So great with that. There's some things that are like deceptively hard to do well in this, I think. And one of them, I think, is we have these ascending lines. If you haven't played this, you have these ascending lines that go up to high D and then back down to C. And we have to get soft when we do that, right? We have to get quieter. So that's one spot where I think we can maybe smooth out that that little part just going over the upper break for you a bit. How have you practiced that? Because that's a spot for everybody, right? That like going from D to C.
Where?
So we have like you have your ascending line. It's like if you look at, I think it's probably the fourth line of your part. You go up to the altissimo D, and then we go back down over the break to the C, right? Do you see that? Okay, so like that's just a clarinet spot, right? That's something we have to practice, is going over that break. So what have you done to work on that spot?
I guess just over and over again, just the high notes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, repetition is definitely important. What do you feel when you do that? Can you play that quick? And then describe to us, like just try to be aware of how does that feel to play it? And because I think that's really important. So we'll talk about that.
From the low D to the high D?
Yeah, and then go back. So the low D, play up your eighth notes, and then the D and the C in the next measure.
Okay.
Okay. So what are you feeling when you do that?
It's kind of tense.
It's getting kind of tense? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our normal reaction, right? So getting over that upper break, do you feel like you're going up to those notes? Like you're aiming high? Or keeping it the same? Or how would you describe that?
Well, kind of, yeah. But like you're also getting softer as you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. So let's ignore the dynamic part right now. I know it's important. But we're just going to work on like getting really smooth connections between those notes. So if we're thinking of it that way, what I'd like you to try to do is actually play this instead of playing the high D. So maybe play the last two beats of that measure. You're going to just play a G. Can you do that?
Wait, what?
Yeah, so beat 3 and 4. So if you play the whole measure. So play a G instead of the D.
Okay.
Yeah, can you give it a try? Yeah, and now do that one more time and crescendo into that G a little bit. Okay, that feels pretty secure, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually the sensation that I have when I'm playing a D is I tend to play it the same way it feels to play a G, because they're actually pretty close, right? In terms of how many fingers, so how much of the clarinet you're actually closing off. So if you play your G, and you just gently move your fingers, you should be able to transition to a D pretty easily without changing anything else about how you're playing. Give it a try a couple times. Yeah, so really slow and really gentle with your fingers. So, yeah. Yep, give it plenty of air. Imagine like you're going down even. Hey, yeah. Yeah, so that's just a good trick for that spot. Is if you think about you're going down, or you imagine yourself playing a lower note, sometimes that comes out a little bit easier. And then you transfer that to moving from D to C. And then you actually are going up for the C, right? Because that actually makes sense because we're opening up more of the clarinet. So if you think I'm going from a lower note to a higher note, I actually think I'm going up. I'm starting from a lower note and I go up, and then that helps me make that transition a little bit smoother. So that's something that you can try. Why don't you try that D to C right there? So imagine like a fuller sound. Don't worry about it being super soft right now. And then imagine going up. So just bringing your focus in a little bit more for the C.
Okay.
Hey, that was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think sometimes just having those little mental switches can really help. And especially when you're getting soft, like a spot like that, it can really help just make you feel like you're a little bit more secure. So try that out, see if that works for you. One other spot that I think we can work on just in the last few minutes is if you see at the bottom of your page, you have a 12/8 where you have this lovely change of character where you go to forte. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So I really liked all of your expression. So I think there's a little bit more you could do here that can bring that out even a little bit more. Can you play just those first like couple measures? So you pick up into the 12/8 and then the first measure and the second measure and end on that A flat. So just two measures basically.
Okay.
Good. So what are you thinking about in terms of your character right there? Like how would you describe like your ascending line and then your descending line?
Well, like when you descend, it's like flowing, like
Mm-hmm.
get up and down, and as it gets further, it's lesser and lesser.
Okay, so yeah, I really like that idea of like it's really flowing together. Now, what about your ascending eighth notes?
It's rising, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, because it's rising in pitch. How do you want them to feel character-wise?
I guess like separated.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we're definitely getting separated. I would say for me, I'd almost want them to be a little bit fuller so they have a little bit more weight because it is forte. So can maybe you add a little length to it so they can still be detached, but they can be filled out a little bit more. You know, and then you can go into your more flowing thing. So can you try that with a little bit more weight? So think of them having a bit more body.
Okay.
Good. And I think with that, it's probably a little bit hard to tell, but you could probably have maybe just a little bit more clarity. You can experiment. I think that room is echoey, so you're probably doing some of that. I'm just not hearing it. And then the last thing I'd say, so you have that, and I think that weight works really well. And then to ensure that you keep that really smooth, like flowing sound in the next one, can you always imagine you're going to the next downbeat? Dee ba da da dee ba da da dee ba da da da. Can you try it just right there, right on that measure, on the G?
Okay.
Good. One more time. See if you can think of those 16th notes as the pickup. D da 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 dee da 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 dee. Yeah, they had a little bit more space that time, so they weren't quite as crushed towards the end of the beat. And that makes it just sound like it's easier, right? Which is what we want, right? We want everyone to think like all of these fast notes are easy. So that's something that I always use to just keep my fingers even. So I really like that switching character. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And hopefully some of those things you can experiment with your practice. And you find some that work for you. So it was really great to hear you play.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So many wonderful things. Thank you. All right, I think you'll just let you take over and share your screen, and I'll mute myself. If you need anything, I'll be right over here.
All right. I don't know. Do you want to come over here and
Sure.
like, do you have a little stool or something?
I have many stools.
Otherwise, we're gonna be like. So I have a built-in percussionist at home, which is really handy.
Huh.
So hopefully you can hear us both okay here. But we've done a lot of clarinet and percussion stuff. And I ended up keeping them after we did some duos. So we put together some stuff for you. And we'll do some playing for you as well. So if you have questions about any of this stuff and you want to like just drop them in the chat, you can do that. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end where you can answer some questions and I can look through the chat and answer some questions too. Oh, we're like back here. But we're just going to take you through some ensembles that you can look for if you're interested in music for clarinet and percussion. Some pieces and some things that you don't necessarily think about if you're a clarinetist or a percussionist, and you're suddenly in a chamber situation where you're making music with someone that produces sound in just such a different way. So seems to be like, is this the order I put it in? I think it is. All right. So we're going to talk, like I said, rehearsal stuff, and then some repertoire for you. Some groups, if you want to just jot those down, if this is something that's interesting to you, these are some groups that you can look up that either have some recordings or are really active online and probably have some material that is posted. If you're looking for pieces for recitals or something, these would be some groups to look at for ideas. So some things that I never thought about as a clarinet player, right? We show up to our room and, you know, say you're in a woodwind quintet and you just take your instruments out and you start playing your piece. That's not what happens when you play with a percussionist, right? So if I'm like, hey, we both get out of a rehearsal at 4 o'clock, let's meet right after that in this room and start rehearsing our duo piece. That's not necessarily what's going to happen. So you can see from these pictures, that's what some of our setups look like for pieces. So there's normally a lot of equipment moving that goes on. And something I don't think about is like, well, am I playing clarinet? Am I playing B flat clarinet? Am I playing A? Like, okay, they're right next to me. He has to deal with like, does he need like a gong or a vibraphone or like a set of trines or like all this stuff? And then like, I can't be like, hey, I'm tired of rehearsing this piece. Let's switch to this other one. Cause he's like, well, now I have to go get a marimba. So that's a little bit different.
It's definitely one of those situations where it's not necessarily just instruments too. If we're working with a piece where I'm playing a multiple percussion setup, that means I have to consider not only instruments but mallets, hardware, sometimes tray stands. So there's a lot of things that have to move around in order for us to go from piece to piece sometimes.
And another thing about that is like sometimes you have the same instruments you're playing, but you have to arrange them differently. Like they have to be in a different spot in the room depending on the piece.
Right.
So that's totally different. Endurance is totally different too, because once he's set up like, hey, we're playing something that's clarinet and snare, he's like, I'm good to go for a long time. But if it's all 16th notes, I'm not going to play that piece over and over and over. Like I'm going to get tired. So that's something that's different. Like if you're rehearsing with another percussionist, like great, you can jam out on that.
Right.
But
the endurance of the muscles in my hands or my arms is way different than just your face and your embouchure.
Yeah. So those are some things that are just like some basic, like, okay, you want to play with a percussionist as a clarinet player. These are the things that I would never have thought of in like scheduling a first rehearsal. So the other stuff that's really different is how we rehearse and how we approach music when we start it. So I think for most of us as clarinet players, like we want to have good tone, right? Do we sound good playing this? Are we like in tune? Are we going to match the other people in the ensemble? Like we might sit down and be like, all right, I'm going to start with this phrase here and I'm going to work through this segment of the piece. Whereas kind of you're kind of working more in the physical space again, because you have all of these things to set up. So you think much bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, and especially for the first piece that we ever worked on, it was much more of a choreography of like, all right, if I'm going to be in this rehearsal and I'm playing a large setup, I need to know where I'm going to go next. I can't necessarily always refer to the music, because by the time sometimes I realize or I read what the direction is in the music, then it's too late and my entrance is bobbled, and then we have to stop and start. So it's kind of an efficiency thing to say, do I physically feel comfortable rehearsing this piece because I know what I'm going to do and what's going to happen.
Yeah, so there's some stuff that we've played where I've had to play some percussion as well in the middle of it. And there's like so much choreography involved that I think that we don't think about, because we're just like, this is my instrument and I just like move my fingers and it's fine. But when you're physically moving to different instruments, it's just, you have to think about the piece in such a different way. We're going to show you what some of our parts look like. Because you might think like, okay, if I'm reading a duo part and I just read the other line as I follow along, that's fine. And sometimes it is fine, and sometimes it's really challenging. I think especially from the clarinet perspective, there's things that I'm just not used to reading, and I'm like, wait, what instrument is making that sound? So I have to know what instrument he's on, where he's actually going to be in the room, so I can communicate entrances and stuff. So that's different. And then how we make sound is different, right? So we're breathing in and then playing, so we're activating the reed. So sometimes I'm a little bit late because there's a delay in that. Whereas when you're playing percussion, right, you hit it and there's sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're all learning our instruments, we tend to be grouped in a homogenous way. So it's like, okay, all the clarinets over here, or at least all the woodwinds over here. And percussionists, we tend to get pushed in the back, and it's like, okay, you all have your own little club in the back, just
stay out of trouble.
Stay out of trouble. Yeah, say it's the back of the bus, basically. But when you do that, you realize that you can visually see where the impact happens. So if I'm sitting with 3 or 4 percussionists, and we say, okay, let's all play together. We can visually and we can also hear like whether we're together or not, because it's just so apparent, and the attack happens right away. In all kinds of percussion instruments, that front articulation is so apparent. But for you all, I know that there is, if we think about a sound envelope, a a clarinet sound might be like this, where it starts and then it tapers off. But a percussion, a sound envelope starts very vertically. You have immediate attack and then it tapers off.
Yeah, we have like just this little decay in our sound,
Mm-hmm.
or a little growth that happens before, that makes it just really interesting to line up, which I imagine is something, if you're doing a lot of playing with strings or something too, that's going to be a similar thing of like, how do you start your sound? But it's definitely something that we've thought of. Now, I think we're going to demonstrate some stuff for the next one, our next point, which is the sound itself. So we have a piece that's for vibraphone, E-flat clarinet, and recording. So just some background on that is because I really like E-flat clarinet. We did a lot of commissions that included E-flat clarinet. Sorry, our goofy speaker. So we actually have this piece that uses recordings, process sound, and it's recordings of us playing, actually. I'm just gonna move the microphone a little bit here. All right. So if you can't hear, can you let me know if you can't hear me? Like, can people just...
Can we give it a thumbs up if you can hear us? All right.
We're good? All right.
Yeah.
Adjust this a little bit. So this is going to be a challenge in itself too, because my E-flat clarinet has been sitting there getting really cold in our basement, and his vibraphone has been sitting there chilling, still sharper than my tendency to play. So like when I play B-flat clarinet, I'm using an adjustable barrel, so I can play it sharp enough for all of his mallet instruments. So we'll see how well I can actually do this. But that's another thing. Like some of these mallet percussion instruments are tuned to 442.
Most mallet instruments are tuned to 442. The reason for that is it doesn't have anything to do with where they're made, because I know some European orchestras like to tune higher, but instrument makers for vibraphones and glockenspiels and marimbas have just found that if they tune the bars a little bit higher, that the sound is just a little bit more agreeable. The sound seems to be a little bit flat if mallet instruments are tuned to 440.
Basically, we like things that are kind of sharp. So they make it slightly sharp, but makes it hard when you're in your basement trying to match it. So what we'll do is we're going to show you a couple things. Well, one, you're probably going to hear that I'm not exactly in tune with 442 right now because this is cold. So that's an aspect of blend that I'm always having to work on, and he's not as much. But articulation is another thing that we definitely spend time on, because I have to decide exactly how I'm going to articulate a note or release a note. And then you have to pick mallets that match with that. So we're actually supposed to match our entrances pretty well, and our sound is supposed to blend. So we're going to do this a couple times without the background track, just to show you what some of those sounds are like. So do you have some other mallets there too?
Yeah, I do. Are we just going to do a demonstration?
Yeah, so let's just try it with a couple different mallets.
Okay.
other one. So you can clearly hear that I'm cold, and then it's really accentuated by that change in the fact that you're tuned higher.
Yeah. So I'm going to be changing up my mallets. So if you hear something like different, know that this is part of our process, is that sometimes if I'm practicing a piece, I may use a mallet that could feel pretty good, is probably something in my imagination that I'm thinking is going to work well, but I will tend to change up my mallets to see what works best. So these are actually pretty soft. These are pretty soft mallets. There's not much articulation. I'm going to go to the higher extreme now. So these are very bright sticks. They're very hard. There's a lot of attack. There's a lot of front to it, and I'm definitely sticking out of the texture.
So could you hear, for those of you on there, can you hear that that had a lot more front to it? So it's a little bit more difficult then for me to blend into that entrance.
So now I'm going to use like a medium mallet that we actually use when we play this piece. And of course too, if it happens to be that we're playing in a hall and somebody's in the audience listening to our dress rehearsal and gives us notes and says, you know, I can't really, then I would change up my mallets too.
Yeah, so it depends on the space we're in.
All right. So hopefully you can hear that the mallets I'm using right now blend a whole lot better with the clarinet.
So that's an example of an articulation thing that we have to consider. The other things that we tend to think about, which you're going to hear a little bit as well in a minute, is the possible dynamic ranges. Because I'm not necessarily a super quiet clarinet player, but when I'm confronted with a snare drum, there's only so much I can do. So sometimes we have to take those things into consideration, that I could play super soft on some things, and that's not as possible to do on some of the instruments that he's playing, whereas he has to bring down his dynamics sometimes to help me. Just a couple pieces that some people tend to start with. Corker's definitely one of the popular ones. Piazzolla tangos, transcriptions are also pretty popular. So if you're looking for something to get started, those are pretty common. But I'm just going to show you a few pieces that we've played. Just learned that Dr. Manasra also played this piece because we both went to Florida State University, and so she played this there as well. We played it in the same recital hall, actually. But this is a really good example of why, in some cases, you can't just show up and sight read. You can't be like, hey, we're going to sight read trios. If you look at this piece, like I, as a clarinet player, like have no idea what's going on in the percussion line. Like I have to sit there and really figure it out. And it's something where we really had to figure this out together, because it is kind of messy. Like you have to figure it out. Lots of it is very like, it's gesture related. So it's unmetered, even though they give you like an approximate, like you should play it at this tempo. You have to really figure out where things line up totally separate of a meter. So this is just a really good example of that type of piece. This is another piece that's E-flat clarinet and vibraphone that we have actually recorded. It's another unmetered piece. And originally this was conceived as a piece where we would wear heart rate monitors to keep track of the length of the notes. But we worked with a composer and it's kind of just more kind of free. So we have to communicate a lot on basically where are the phrases, even though if you look at it, we're not playing things that really look related. The percussion part has like all sorts of dynamic changes and things that would just kind of pop out, but they have to sound like they go together. So that's a really different type of rehearsal than like our 16th notes lining up. So some of this music is just really different than a lot of music that like I would be used to sitting down with like a woodwind quintet and reading. This particular piece here is PPEB, and the name is what is
Pratt,
it?
John
So
Pratt.
this is based off of, for the percussionist, Pratt is like a snare book or something.
Well, John Pratt was a great pedagogue for the rudimental drumming field. He actually passed away recently, but his books and his solos are almost everybody plays them. So this was part of the commission project. So it's supposed to be Pratt plus E flat, and Jamie Whitmarsh came up with PPEB.
Yeah, so it's basically it's supposed to sound kind of like a fife and drum inspired thing, so kind of military. Which is an interesting relationship because I think a lot of people are like, really, you have a clarinet percussion ensemble? But there's actually so many examples of this type of music, of woodwinds and percussion. So fife and drum being one of them. And we see that even in orchestral excerpts. So like Scheherazade has like this nice little melodic excerpt for clarinet that has a snare drum part with it. And so there are these pieces that have clarinet with snare drum. And probably one of the big ones for clarinet players that leaves the kind of more military tradition a bit is the Nielsen concerto. So, sorry. Computer's spazzing there a little bit. So if you aren't familiar with the Nielsen concerto, it's just super crazy in terms of the characters for the clarinet. And it has a rather prominent snare drum part. Enough that it's a snare excerpt. Yes.
Oh yeah.
So they have to know it. If you've already played it, yes, I'm going to play it on the wrong clarinet because I didn't get my A clarinet out. But I'm going to play an example of this because it's a good example of not an accompaniment style. So when we're thinking of kind of fife and drum, where you have a field drum of some sort that's playing rhythms that's helping or supporting a melodic line. This is more of a dialogue or a conversation between the instruments. So basically, the way I see it is the snare drum tends to irritate the clarinet. So anytime the snare drum is coming in, then something wild is going to happen in the clarinet part. So up until the opening has this kind of like weird kind of folky melody. And then we have an example that we're going to play towards the beginning of the concerto, where the snare drum kind of kicks off one of the clarinet's little fits. So I'm just going to make sure I don't know, do you need to adjust anything so the snare drum doesn't like blow out anyone's face, or we're good? All right. you can see that you have like kind of all this wild stuff in the clarinet part, and I think the snare drum is kind of the instigator for a lot of that.
The interesting thing about this particular situation, and when we've done a master class where we talk about our collaboration, is we would never be this close together generally in an ensemble. The solo clarinetist would be at the front of the ensemble, and I would be in the back where I belong.
Yeah, so we have an advantage right here. So what we wanted to show you that's related to that is there's a piece by Eric Mandat that some of you are probably familiar with that name because he writes a lot of solo clarinet music, especially that has some extended techniques in it. And he wrote a piece for clarinet and percussion where the first movement is based on the Nielsen Concerto, and it's called Prune Danish. And it's basically the Nielsen Concerto with quarter tones and multiphonics. So I'm going to be playing things that sound like they're out of tune, and some multiphonics as well. But you should be able to hear that some of it is based on like some of the things that we just played from the Nielsen Concerto. So this is taking an example of clarinet and percussion from the orchestral world and bringing it into chamber music. So hopefully you could hear some of the kind of fun sounds that I get to make in that. But I think that that's just a really cool one to show that you could take some of that stuff from a larger ensemble and still get to have fun with it in a chamber music setting and kind of remake it into something that's a little bit different. And hopefully just the wildness of it, that even if you think it's a little bit weird, it is somewhat enjoyable too. Just because it's a new experience. So some of the stuff I already talked about, there are a lot of examples of clarinet and percussion playing together in large ensemble music. So I really encourage you to just be aware of it. If it's something that's interesting to you, like see when am I playing with the percussion section in band, or when do I have a part that's really lining up with a member in the percussion section in orchestra, or if you play in a contemporary ensemble, how do you relate to the percussion part? Just because it's so interesting to kind of get your ears in another sound world for someone that plays just a totally different instrument. So let's see, I think I saw some things. All right. So if there's any questions you have, I'm trying to look through the chat. You can let us know here, but otherwise it's just been really fun to play for you, and hopefully you found something interesting.
Thank you so much. That was really cool. Hopefully that came across on Zoom. For the most part, it was coming across here. Percussion and clarinet is one of my favorite groupings of chamber music to do. Does anybody here have any questions? What was the most challenging piece to put together that you've ever done that comes to mind first?
You know, funny enough, it was Corker. Corker is a Libby Larson piece, and I had actually played it before with a clarinetist in my undergrad, and we were getting ready for a concert, and we needed a piece to fill some time. And I said, why don't we play this? It's pretty straightforward, especially because we had just played Sources 3. And for some reason, the clarinet part is a problem. But
They usually are, I think.
but it was interesting because it didn't fit our mood very well. So while we were able to, learn it and perform it, it was hard to put together because it didn't feel comfortable in a way. That's at least that's what I think. I think it was that piece.
I think that probably was one that we played that didn't fit us as an ensemble particularly well. And so it's like, I think for us, if it was a piece that really fit something that we were trying to put together as a program, then it almost didn't matter how hard it was. But when we were trying to just fit something in because it was a piece that like we already had floating around or people already knew it, that made it kind of more difficult to work on, which I think we can probably all relate when you have to play something just because, versus when you're putting together something that you really feel strongly about, a theme or something, you're kind of more into it.
Yeah.
I have one more question, and you can tell me not to ask this if you'd like, but do you have any unsecret projects or anything coming up? What are the next, what are you doing in the pandemic? I'll just ask it that way.
Well, we just recorded an illegal transcription of an Eddie Daniels Christmas tune.
Beautiful, I love it.
But in like a month and a half or so, we're going to be playing on my faculty recital. So we're going to be playing all of Prune Danish. We're going to be playing Clarimba by Jorge Montilla.
Quiet Exchange by Chapman.
Yeah, and then another piece that's clarinet that has some parts that are jazz influenced, and then all of your parts are cymbals.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of fun.
That's right.
So yeah, that recital should be streamed. I think I'm waiting on confirmation. I don't know if I have to record it or if we're allowed to stream it live. But we can definitely share if you're interested in hearing some of that repertoire.
Yes, and if you share that with me, I'll share it with everybody at home as well. We would love to see it in action. Just the sonorities that can be conjured with clarinet and percussion are just, I could just listen to people play around with it for hours.
Yeah, it's super fun to experiment. So
yeah. That's my favorite part about playing with percussion is it gives you permission to experiment outside of our normal clarinet boxes that we're in. We can, kind of like what you were saying with Lexi, like just make some weird sounds. It's kind of like that from start to finish when you play with percussion, and that's so cool.
Yes, definitely.
Good. Any other? Yes, I will. In the chat, people want a link to the recital. I'll definitely send that out if you can send it to me.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Well,
Great. Well, if you think of something, or you have questions for either of us, just send me an email. It's just fraleyj@uwec.edu. I'd be happy to direct you to some resources or answer any questions. So it was great to see all of you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. That was wonderful.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, I will be in touch, and I hope everyone else has a wonderful rest of your week. I hope that my emails will just be better in the future. So thank you for all of you putting up with me. So have a wonderful day, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one.
You too.